the building block skill in trigonometry is being able to talk about the different sides of a triangle in relation to each other. So that's why we're looking at identifying sides in triangles. So here's a right angled triangle. We start by calling this angle over here theta, which is a Greek letter. And I want to name each of these three sides in relation to theta, okay? Now, because it's a right angled triangle, you've got two shorter sides, and then this longest side, which is always opposite the right angle. And as we know, that longest side has this special name, the hypotenuse, which we learned in Pythagoras' theorem. Okay, so that one's always the hypotenuse, no matter which angle you're looking at, because it's a unique side. But these other two sides, how shall I name them? Well, I can see that this side down at the bottom, well, it's next to the angle theta. Next to, another word for that is adjacent. So we call this the adjacent side. And then you got this other one, which is all the way on the other side. It's opposite. It's facing theta. Okay, so you can see it's looking all the way across. So you've got the hypotenuse, which is always the longest side. That's always opposite the right angle. You've got the adjacent side down here, and then you've got the opposite side all the way across the other side of the triangle from theta. Okay, now the important thing to get is that even though the hypotenuse stays the same, whichever angle you're looking at, the opposite and adjacent sides, they will switch around depending on your point of view. So if I draw the same triangle again, okay, here we go, and I've got my right angle, which means that this side over here is the hypotenuse. So now if I look from up here, okay, this is a different angle, so I'm going to call it alpha, which is another Greek letter. Now, the hypotenuse is still the hypotenuse, it's still the longest side, okay? But my opposite and my adjacent sides have switched over. You can see that this side up here, the vertical one, that's the one that's next to or adjacent to alpha. So now it's the adjacent side. And of course, if I look all the way across from the other side, the opposite side is down here now. So the tricky thing to get is that your adjacent and your opposite side, they change depending on your point of view. And that happens all the time in real life, okay? So we want to think about, well, which perspective are we looking from, okay? Now, we want to be able to talk about how all of these sides relate to each other, and that's what the trigonometric ratios are about, after which trigonometry is named. So, the trigonometric ratios, or it's often shortened to trig ratios, there's three of them, which match up to the relationships between the sides, okay? So let's redraw this guy. So if I got theta down here, that means I've got the opposite, which I'm going to abbreviate to OPP, the adjacent side, which I'll abbreviate like this, and the hypotenuse, okay? So I've got my right angle here. So the three ratios are, they're called sine, cosine, and tangent. That's a bit long, so we abbreviate them. We call this one, well, sine is just one syllable, but we write it without the E on the end. We call this one cos, and we abbreviate this one to tan. Okay, so the way it works is that it's a ratio, each one is a ratio between a pair of sides. So I would write it as sine of this angle, theta, is equal to the opposite side on the hypotenuse. Opposite side on hypotenuse. That's sine. Cos is the adjacent side on the hypotenuse. And the last one is tan, which is the opposite side, this one, on the adjacent side. That's the two shorter sides. Okay, and you might notice as well, that's actually also equal to sine theta on cos theta, because if I did this divided by this, the hypotenuse, these denominators would cancel. You'd just be left with these numerators, opposite on adjacent, okay, which gives you the same ratio. So a mnemonic device for remembering all of this, because it's quite hard, is to notice that you've got, if you like, that's O over H, A over H, and this one is O over A. So S goes with OH, so people write SOH. Sine is opposite on hypotenuse. Cos goes with A and H. Cosine equals adjacent on hypotenuse. And T goes with O and A. Tan equals opposite on adjacent, so we read that as SOHCAHTOA, which is a bit long and awkward and not a real word, but it does help us to remember what all the ratios are.